spirits clash to reenact the bloody past in ancient wars, both famous and forgotten. Every great war has its heroes. I'm just curious what kind you'll be.
I think I need to pursue
What's
one of my favorite
What do you
lines.
mean, ruins and battlefields?
Any building strong enough to withstand the rigors of time has a history. Every battlefield is steeped in death. Both attract spirits. They press against the veil, weakening the barrier between our worlds. When I dream in such places, I go deep into the Fade. I can find memories no other living being has ever seen.
So we saw a Solus slightly approves. Approval for this game. Throughout it all, we're constantly tracking how the various members of your party feel about you.
Right.
What kind of effects does that have on the game as you play?
Well, let's see. No, they will change their attitude towards you based on their overall approval or lack thereof, and you can reach a point of negative approval. Well, they may up and leave you entirely. It works differently for each character, but yes.
Positive approval also unlocks content.
Yes,
later on as well. So your relationship varies, and the thing I think is really cool. You guys tackled this. Is that they're aware of the major decisions you make, even if they're not in the party. You can't sort of hide them away at camp and go, no, don't worry about me. I'm not wiping out a town.
If it's one of the decisions that is sort of like very publicly known, I mean, just because they're not in the party, they're not gonna not hear that you like. You brought down the Empress of Orlais or whatever, right? That's just an example, people. But I mean, if it's a big public decision, yes, they will definitely know, and they will react, and they will talk to you about it when you come back. For decisions that aren't public, you need to be in the party for them to react to it.
Now, I like this because it's sort of Solus, a master of pragmatism.
You fall asleep in the middle of ancient ruins. Isn't that dangerous?
I do set wards. And if you leave food out for the giant spiders, they are usually content to live and let live.
It's a man who's prepared.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anyone going so far into the Fade. That's extraordinary.
Thank you. It's not a common field of study for obvious reasons. Not so flashy as throwing fire or lightning. The thrill of finding remnants of a 1,000-year-old dream? I would not trade it for anything. I will stay there. At least until the breach has been closed.
Was that in doubt?
I am an apostate surrounded by Chantry forces in the middle of a mage rebellion. Cassandra has been accommodating, but you understand my caution.
The giant hole in the sky trumps any other concerns. We can worry about the rest later.
Yes. Who can say what this world will look like when we are done fighting for it? But now let us hope either the mages or the Templars have the power to seal the breach.
One thing people will notice when they play, if you're familiar with our approval bars, is that there's no record of it on your character sheet any longer.
That's true.
So you're not going to have a visual indication that says where you sit in approval. You're going to have to talk to them to get an idea of that.
In fact, we've introduced kind of a different way of talking to them as well. Asking, this was a big thing coming out of Dragon Age 2. People wanted to still be able to dive into the conversation, even if it wasn't sort of a major plot beat. It felt very limiting, I think was the feedback we got. So I really like that we've gone back to the idea that there are hubs and investigations you can pursue.
I think having the 20 questions, as I called it, having that available to people is part of their personal feeling of getting to know a character, to sort of being able to, optionally ask them all the sorts of questions. So we just wanted a way to be able to engage them in the camp where you can ask them questions, and those questions do change as your approval changes as well. So if you become friendly with somebody and their approval gets higher, that will open up new questions to ask.
Now, one thing we've seen a lot of questions about, even I think probably in the chat right now, according to Connell, is we have a team of writers. I think it was 10 at our peak, wasn't it? And then we have multiple storylines. We
got as high as 9, yes.
Yeah, multiple characters, all reacting to different things. You might be a human, you might be an elf, and so on. What kind of strategies do you and the team use to kind of keep that all straight, and how do you sort of organize the writing? That's kind of a high-level question, but kind of tackle some bits.
Vizio.
Wikis, Confluence, we use a ton of documentation.
We keep a flow chart. I think we also would establish templates as well. We would start with one character that we'd write and make sure that character had a certain amount of reactions. So let's say I started off. I wrote Cassandra and Dorian, and so I write Dorian, and I have him reacting to certain major beats in the plot, and I'll write his question hub to mark what sort of questions you can ask him. And then the other writers would sort of follow that as sort of a guideline. They're very bad at following it, by the way. Although characters work a little bit differently.
It's like the Grace Notes, or when you break the rules, right?
Yes.
You got to know them well, and then bust them wide open.
Yeah, and everybody we had on Dragon Age, this is not their first dog and pony show, right?
Usually we say rodeo.
Yeah. But, I mean, they've done it before, so they looked at the guidelines and like, okay, so we got X and X and X number of reactions to do. All right, so I'm going to have them respond to these. And I said to them, take the ones that your character would feel most strongly about and make those the big sort of character-defining moments, right? And everything else can be a little bit smaller. I think it's nice, too, if you come back and even if your character just has a couple of lines where they recognize what's going on. And I especially love it, too. I said, if in doubt, have them ask the player character how they feel about stuff, because sometimes we fall into a little bit of a trap where the character, then the follower sort of goes on and on and on about themselves, and the player's like, yeah, that's very interesting. What about me?
I remember when you guys first did the scene where you sort of start the Inquisition,
right.
and without putting too much of a spoiler on, I thought it was fantastic when it's optional, but you can basically say, wait, they're calling me the Herald of Andraste. And Colin kind of leads in and goes, how do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that,
I thought that was a very cool moment in terms of defining, I guess the player's experience. And I think that especially, given that one of the major themes running through the game is faith,
yes.
It was nice to be able to go, I think that's wrong. I disagree, or I agree. Yeah, I'm down with that. Thumbs up, I'm in charge.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily determine how everybody else in the world is going to feel about it, but you can determine how you feel about it, and people will react to that, yes?
I think that's a pretty powerful element.
Yeah. There's a few places in the game where you can both set how you feel about faith in general, about how you feel about being called the Herald of Andraste. Those are slightly separate things, not necessarily the same, but you can establish that, and there are also places where you can sort of change your mind, because, not to spoil anything, but there are things that happen in the game that may, in fact, cause you to rethink where you sit on those topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So some other things we wanted to do is we wanted to have a little more liveliness happening in this space.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of these smaller characters. Flissa is a good example. In fact, Flissa was voiced by one of the winners of our Fan VO contest.
Yes.
I forget her name. I'm sorry. I wish I had it written down here. But she was a huge talent. She actually was just able to rattle off, which is good.
Yeah.
Amazing accent.
Caroline was quite pleased.
Yeah. The followers as well, as they kind of joined in.
Rosemary Bucknell.
Oh, Rosemary Bucknell. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Connell.
We have a small research team here. That's great. And so having them scattered around. Now, the one thing I did want to hit on is that obviously we have 2 games worth of world that we're kind of building upon here.
Tell me about it.
And, obviously maintaining that lore is a big deal. The other big thing we should probably talk about is the keep and how it interacts.
Oh, right.
So take those as you will, sir.
Well, when we started looking at all the variables we would need to bring into the game, one big concern we had, and this came up in sort of the aftermath of DAO, we had the DLCs like going into Witch Hunt, and then again in DA2, and it was sort of like anytime we had an issue that where a variable wasn't set properly, it would cause all sorts of problems, because the player going in, let's say they play Witch Hunt, and I think there was a bug somewhere where if you spoke to Morgan right at the end of the game, it could possibly unset your romance flag, the actual variable that's tracked that says whether or not you're in a romance. So somebody could have potentially gone into Witch Hunt initially with that flag unset, and the player doesn't know it's unset, so they think they're getting dialogue saying that they're in a romance with Morgan, but they're not.
Right.
And they're like, well, that wasn't very satisfactory. She was rather cold to me. So it's like that's the worst case scenario, right? You set somebody up to expect some kind of reactivity, and yet we're failed by the variables. It's sort of a garbage in, garbage out scenario.
We had the magic of the resurrecting Zevran as well. That was
yeah,
a little unfortunate.
Then DA2. Yeah. I mean, we did, especially when we go out of our way to actually make the variant content, and then it doesn't work properly. So the player's left with this impression that it wasn't there at all. And it's like, well, I wrote an entire other version of that plot. Oh my god.
And so that takes us to the Keep, which
yes.
is basically a tool, DragonAgeKeep.com, absolutely free.
Yeah.
Ties into your Origin account and allows you to establish a world history. I imagine if you're watching this stream, you've probably set yours up. But anyway, you can see feedback that yes, it's linked to Inquisition.
It lets you not worry as well about whether you played like say Origins on PC and DA2 on console. You're okay on that front.
Well, it's a big problem with people that have jumped generations. Right?
Yeah.
Xbox 360 to Xbox One or PS3 to PS4.
Yeah.
And then, so if you wouldn't mind, we've got a couple questions we should hit on characters, but talk me through what you guys did with. Well, I know. But let's talk people through what we did on the war table here.
Yeah. There was a point in the game where we called these initially operations, which is how do we give the player a sense of not only the fact they're they're a growing organization of the Inquisition, but like what's going on in the world, and a way for them to touch on various parts of the world and imports from the Keep, without necessarily needing to have an entire plot that revolved around it necessarily.
This one, for instance, is part of an arc that follows the fact that there was a cult
in Andraste,
here.
yeah.
And Liliana or Josephine, you can actually choose who kind of runs it down and what information they find. And they're kind of calling back to that element on Origins.
Yeah.
You're getting some rewards, but it's a nice acknowledgement of the fact that, this was really a thing. It's not, and actually there's the next step in the quest. Yeah. So it kind of takes you through this exploration of Haven's history, but it does so in a way that didn't require us to, let's build a giant Haven dungeon and so on, because obviously we'd built a lot of game elsewhere.
Right.
And
I think I don't really subscribe to the belief that people aren't willing to read anymore. Yes, this is a lot of text to tell the story this way.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people are into it, and the feedback we've gotten on so far has been really good. So that's very rewarding that we had, that they said that, or a lot of people have said, I should say, that it sort of adds to their feeling that this growing sense of politics and intrigue. And some people had actually asked whether or not it was just you spend X number of time and you automatically get the reward. That is some of the operations, but there are definitely some operations where which advisor you pick, they all have little blurbs that say this is what how they believe this issue should be handled. There are a number of things where it's like that has a definite effect on the success, or just different branching storylines. I know Patrick and Luke particularly, they made a couple of branching storyline operations that had the programmers pulling their hair out, basically.
Because they were checking like 17 different things, and how you'd done, and if you'd done this plot state, and how far in the game you were.
Patrick sat down and started making his own timeline schematics, and then one time a programmer came in and he says, "This shouldn't work." But it does. I don't know what you did, and Patrick's like,
The key is to not break it at that point. Yes.
Just don't look at it too hard.
So there was a question coming in from the stream Connie's put up, which is, what is your favorite character you wrote? Now, you get to write a lot of stuff. So we're going to do you second. I will tell you my favorite character is, because I wrote a tiny bit for this game. I wanted to make sure I knew the tools and that kind of stuff, is Jan Herod here.
Did you write him?
Oh yeah, I wrote Herod.
Oh, that's right. That point where,
where it's like, I'll take some of Haven to relieve some team.
Yes.
And frankly, it's simply this.
How did you come to be here?
I love Herod.
Come from a little town called Lothering. Long gone now. I was in Redcliffe when the Darkspawn hit it during the Blight. Helped rebuild. Left when royalty decided it was time to hand the place over to the bloody mages. Ended up here. Just missed the boom. Can't decide if I'm the luckiest son of a bitch walking or the exact opposite.
Just that. Just simply, Herod is this harbinger of disaster with the most baller mustache in the game.
Has he got a Stroud?
Yeah, he does. He's rocking some heavy facial hair.
Whichever you are, I hope the streak is broken.
A man can dream.
That's Alex, isn't it?
That's Alex. Yeah, we're listening. So
goodbye.
That was a heck of a challenge, having multiple Inquisitor voices per gender, something we've never done before.
Actually, you know what? almost not a challenge at all for the writers.
Well, it's true. Actually, that ended up a lot with localization, and voiceover,
and cinematics,
and programming, and cinematics.
I remember the look on their faces when you said you were going to do that.
Yeah, they were not happy.
Yeah,
I recall loosely. So then the other big thing is for you, favorite character? Any standouts for Inquisition? Or?
You're gonna have to ask me to pick between my babies.
It's Alistair.
No.
I mean,
for Inquisition?
Oh
or
no,
for
not
overall?
no. Overall, it's probably Alistair.
Shale.
Oh, right.
Shale.
You share a hatred of pigeons.
I don't know if anyone knows this story, but I mean, at the time when I had to write Shale, which happened really quickly, I was like, okay, go write Shale. I'm like sitting in my office, and there was the one that's right at the corner where it has where you overlook the heat exchange unit on the next door, the hotel roof.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where all the pigeons come to have sex.
Or be warm.
And they would sit on that window that's in that alcove, and there's so much pigeon manure. Like somebody opened up a faucet under these things, and I'd be sitting at my desk, and I'd be looking out at these pigeons having sex, and seeing the what I call the faucet windows, and I'd be like, God, I hate these. I hate those.
Strategically put a statue of Mabari back.
Blind rats. I just hated them so much, so that's how that worked its way into Shale, which people who know me say Shale is probably the character that is most like.
Yeah, you are covered in a lot of crystals. So then the other question that was coming in is race and class kind of reactivity.
Right.
What do we got there? And also, what did I just unplug?
Did you unplug something?
I don't know. Maybe.
Do we still have video? Do you guys still have audio? There we go.
I'm good.
Yeah. Race and class. It varies. There are certain points in the game where it'll be very obvious, like when you go to the war table, there are some operations that are there specific. A lot of times it is lines just dropped into conversation. Sometimes there are whole conversations about it. I mean, I know there's one. Is it your first conversation with Josephine?
Oh, it's not your first, but right in her arc, she actually digs into your background and asks, like, so you were, and then that varies entirely based on your background, and then digs in on, were you a mercenary? If so, what kind of job did you do? How did you feel about working there? It's pretty epic.
Yeah, we established the basic facts, but then we want to we give you a chance to sort of say how you feel about.
Alfred.
Sorry?
I found Alfred.
Elfruit.
Right down there.
Well,
anyway.
Elfruit is everywhere. Patrick gets mad because I call it junkweed.
I must find the Alfred.
Yeah. What's they saying? Getting a lot of thank yous for Dorian. Oh. Hope people like him.
Reaction's been positive so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got obviously you've got one of the longest histories in the writing group. I think. No, other than Luke. Luke's obviously.
Luke is our grand old man.
Yeah,
Yes.
he was here for Baldur's Gate 1.
He was here for Baldur's Gate 1.
And you started at the end of 1, didn't you?
2. I came in right as they were starting 2.
So obviously there's some awareness, and I think you interact with the community a fair amount.
Yeah.
You know, with players coming and talking to you about how the characters you've written have affected them and stuff. What kind of effect does that have on you as a creator? I know for me it can be pretty powerful when someone comes and basically says thank you for. Whatever thing kind of helped them get through a tough time or whatever.
Sometimes it's a little humbling.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people send me messages, and they don't really want them broadcast, so I'm not going to reblog them or anything. But sometimes they'll contact me and say I was depressed, or I was suicidal, or I was having a hard time coming out to my family. And I mean, it's not just the fact that we have gay characters. I mean. Sometimes it's just I was going through a really rough time in my life, and your game helped me through it. Some people get very emotional, and it is really humbling. You know, it's sometimes we get distracted by the fact that our fans are very passionate, or they get upset about things, and then someone turns around and sort of floors you with how much of a personal connection they made with your work. That it touched them, and that sort of makes you sit back and go, wow, it's good to put that in perspective sometimes.
Yeah, it really is, and I think obviously people are more inclined if they have feedback, and of course we welcome the feedback. We've been taking lots of it since DA2, trying to listen to people.
Yeah, taking it in the face.
Taking it. No, but I mean, it's you've got to take what's good, what's bad. You got to balance it out.
Yeah.
But definitely, when you also get someone saying, "Hey, that really helped," or
yes.
"That was really special," that can be pretty powerful as a creator. Keeps you going, I think.
And you balance it. I mean, I think sometimes there's a tendency for people to say that only negative criticism is worthwhile. You want to give sort of time to understand that there are people who really enjoyed it, and sometimes they don't feel as talking as much. So you want to acknowledge negative criticism, but you also want to when somebody says they like something, you want to take that to heart as well. It's everybody has different opinions, and it is not a crime, I think, to take a compliment.
Yeah. Now, one thing we should hit, because I think you guys did a pretty fantastic job of this, and it was a big challenge for us, is kind of the idea of the side quest and how it interacts with the Inquisition and power and all of those kind of things. Basically, how did we fill a world? How did your team approach these large exploration spaces? We're heading to the Storm Coast now.
Right.
And just wanted to kind of dig into what kind of work you guys did and how you made these spaces, I guess, matter to the game, as opposed to just being a bunch of side quests.
Well, a lot of it, I mean, this was your direction.
Well, thank you.
Let me talk about your direction, Mike.
And then you had to do it, so
yes.
it's more about how. Like, yeah.
Well, if you look at our previous games, while we had side content, it was literally tertiary, right? You progress the plot by doing the plot. So you'd complete a major quest arc, and that would open up the next quest arc. So what Mike wanted us to try, or at least to put into concept, is the idea of completing quests to open up new areas, which would then give you power to open up new quests. You understand? So that it becomes a sort of a, what did you call it?
Like the loop, a compulsion loop.
A compulsion loop,
yeah. And I mean, one of my big goals was to say that there are activities in the world that feed into that.
Yes.
Things like gathering materials for the requisitions was a big example. And so one thing we ended up doing is having the level designers in some of these spaces. They kind of went first.
Yes.
Which was totally new for us.
Well, there was a number of false starts actually where we were kind of first it was actually the writers going in first, but then we found out very quickly that the writers, us writers sort of off writing some story, and that doesn't really play as well into gameplay. We're like, okay, wait. So then the writers were sort of in the weeds writing the actual plot, so the level designers went in. And they found the opposite. Then they went ahead and they were doing gameplay, but it didn't have a lot of sort of story and ambiance to it that we were looking for. So then we backed up again. We're like, okay, the writers and the level designers have to sort of go hand in hand and make it at the same time. So we're opening up a conversation where we're saying, okay, we have a new area. Let's talk about the theme that's at play in this area. What sorts of things are going on here? Why is the Inquisition in the area? Because we don't just want it to be that I just decided to go here just because.
That was probably, I think, one of the big breakthroughs is no matter what the area was, there had to be a reason the Inquisitor would come here.
Right. Personally.
So yeah, we've shown the marsh earlier in the stream, and the fact that you go there in part because you've been challenged personally by the Avar chieftain's son, and that your men have been kidnapped and held hostage. All those things kind of mesh together where it's like, oh, okay, I get why I would be here. But while I'm here, there's also a bunch of other cool opportunities and lore and so on to learn.
Yeah. And it's the writers sitting down with the level designers talking about how to populate these areas, and they sort of wanted the idea that no matter where you were, there would always be something just on the horizon. But that's something. When we talk about exploration in terms of experience, I think it's important to recognize that not all experience in a game is combat. Combat is definitely an element, so sometimes you want to encounter creatures and you want to kick their asses, definitely. But an experience could be, how about you you're pressing over this hill and there's like this beautiful vista, and you might just stop there and go, holy shit, this is absolutely gorgeous. That is to the player as valid an experience as a fight or discovering that there's a dungeon over there, finding a cache of crafting. Let me say the crafting is awesome.
Yeah.
I have never been the guy that does crafting. Crafting for me is like, okay, there's crafting in the game, great, I don't care. But once I realized that I could change the colors, but the stuff I made this shield that was like a bright red, and I got to name it, and I was like, okay, yeah.
What'd you call it?
What did I call it? Blood something. I don't know.
The blood something.
Yeah.
I was opening. It's not this save, but there was a save I was opening up earlier, and there was a suit of armor called Nugs died for this, which made me chortle.
I made a pair of daggers for Cole. One called Reese and one called Evangeline.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So once I got to that, it's like I found myself going back to areas like I need some Evurite. I'm going to this area for Evurite. Okay.
Evangeline had black hair. I need onyx. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there was also another big thing. So while I deal with this immortal bear here, they are tough.
Bears,
they are
man.
tough. There we go. Finally. Thankfully, they drop really nice. It's
Very
nice.
sad. I really hate killing them.
I know, but you're in their turf and they're very territorial. And anyway, so banter, because obviously you're out in these huge areas.
Right.
The party has banter, and I think one of the things, if you wouldn't mind touching on it, is just that the banter doesn't empty out, sort of just because you've gone through everybody at the same time. You guys did a really good job, I think, of staggering it.
Well, actually, the level designers were working on a system where they would look for spaces. Okay, it's like here's a space where we're not going to put any combat. Or where the experience is going to be something else, right? And it might be banter, it might be an ambient creature or an encounter or something, but you'll sort of cross that area and they'll populate it, or you'll start the banter. The thing that I think will frustrate people is that the triggers disappear.
They aren't the fixed triggers like they used to.
So you cannot mine the banter like, okay, I'm going to run across the bridge at Orzammar 1,000 times to hear all the banter. Not going to work, people. So yes, but the
you took way too much glee in that.
I take my fun where I can.
There you go. It's a Tusket.
A
I don't see
Tusket.
them very often.
Oh, they're too cute.
Yeah, I got standards.
But you need them for some excellent crafting.
There you go.
Sadly, I know I had to hunt down a certain number of nugs for this one particular thing I wanted, and I'm like, sorry. Sacrificed on the altar of Inquisition.
Of fashion.
Yeah. What was I saying? Oh, the banter.
Yeah.
So yeah, us finding out that like we made a bunch of banter, some of which is reactive to things that you've done, some of it which is reactive to itself. So you have like an arc of banter for a particular combination of characters. Sometimes it'll be look at imports from the keep, and then there's short. You'll get some sort of quick back and forth, and some of them will be very long. But yes, they will. And sorry, I'm talking over my own words here. So they'll fire, and the one really new thing we got now is the ability for the player to chime in on the banter as well, right?
That's right. We don't use that everywhere, but
No.
when we do, it's really quite cool because they're like, "What do you think, boss?" And you're like, I think you should shush."
Or you've got two guys that are at each other's throats, and you have the chance to come in and say, "All right, knock it off," or support one or the other, or something like that.
And we've I would say we don't have a ton of sort of automatic continued dialogue in this game. There's
Auto dialogue.
Yeah, sort of. I know some people feel frustrated by that. I get it. It feels like it's taking your agency away. It's usually only if it's like go on.
I think the part where I object to auto dialogue on a design level is I don't want my player character expressing opinions
right
without my consent. So I mean, if it's continuing on a thought that I've already chosen, pardon me.